Think you know everything about the 1983 comedy classic Trading Places? Think again. Behind Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd's hilarious performance swap lies a treasure trove of bizarre behind-the-scenes secrets, from a one-take F-bomb that broke a devout Catholic actor's rule, to $6 billion in real trading halted by star power, to a guerrilla scene that sparked decades of controversy. The film even inspired an actual Wall Street law named after Eddie Murphy. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Trading Places. Fact 1. Richard Pryor set himself on fire. Before Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd became the iconic duo we know from Trading Places, the film was actually supposed to star two completely different comedy legends. Screenwriters Timothy Harris and Herschel Weingrod originally developed the script with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder in mind, hoping to reunite the comedy pair who had already scored massive hits together with Silver Streak in 1976 and Stir Crazy in 1980. The two were in incredibly high demand at the time, and Paramount Pictures saw Trading Places as the perfect third vehicle to capitalize on their proven chemistry. However, everything changed in June of 1980 when Richard Pryor suffered a horrific accident that would derail the entire production. While freebasing cocaine at his home, Pryor set himself on fire, resulting in severe burns over more than half of his body. The incident was devastating and required months of recovery, making it impossible for him to commit to the film. With Pryor unable to participate, the producers had to completely rethink their casting strategy. That's when Paramount Pictures suggested a relatively unknown Saturday Night Live comedian named Eddie Murphy for the role. At the time, Murphy had only appeared in one film, the action comedy 48 Hours, which hadn't even been released yet. Director John Landis had never heard of Murphy and reportedly asked, "Who's Eddie Murphy?" when the studio first floated his name. However, after Paramount showed him test audience reactions to 48 Hours, which were overwhelmingly positive, Landis agreed to meet with the young comedian in New York City and was immediately impressed by his talent. Interestingly, when Murphy learned he might be stepping into a role originally intended for Pryor, his comedy idol, he actually lobbied to have Gene Wilder replaced as well, because he was afraid of being seen as just a Richard Pryor wannabe. The studio ultimately cast Dan Aykroyd instead, and the rest became cinema history. Fact 2. A bikini photo sealed Jamie Lee Curtis's casting. When director John Landis wanted Jamie Lee Curtis to play Ophelia in Trading Places, the studio executives at Paramount Pictures immediately shut down the idea. At the time, Curtis was known almost exclusively for her work in horror films like Halloween and Prom Night, which had earned her the label of Scream Queen. The studio saw her as box office poison for a major comedy, viewing horror movies as low-quality B-films that wouldn't translate to mainstream success. They simply didn't believe Curtis could carry a big-budget production or attract audiences outside the horror genre. Landis refused to give up on his choice, and he came up with an unconventional solution to change their minds. He presented the studio executives with a photograph of Curtis in a bikini, arguing that she had the look and appeal to make the movie more marketable. The strategy worked, and the executives reversed their decision. Landis later admitted that Curtis's agreement to do a topless scene in the film also helped seal the deal with the nervous studio bosses who were worried about taking risks. For Curtis, landing the role of Ophelia was a life-changing opportunity that she credits with saving her career. She later said that nobody else would have cast her in that part, and that John Landis was the only person who believed she could do it. Without that moment, she acknowledged, she wouldn't have had the successful career she went on to enjoy. The role marked her first major big-budget film and proved she could handle comedy just as well as horror, opening doors to A-list opportunities. Interestingly, Curtis was paid only $70,000 for Trading Places, a significant pay cut from the $1 million she had earned for Halloween 2 just a couple of years earlier. Despite the lower salary, she recognized the role as a crucial stepping stone that would allow her to move beyond the horror genre and establish herself as a versatile actress in Hollywood. Fact 3. Donna Mechie refused to say the F word. Twice. Donna Mechie was a Hollywood Golden Age veteran who brought decades of experience to Trading Places, but there was one major problem when it came time to film the climactic trading floor scene. Ameche, who was a devout Catholic and a conservative Republican, had very strong religious convictions that made him extremely uncomfortable with using profanity of any kind. Throughout his long career, he had maintained strict personal standards about the language he would use on screen, and he often apologized in advance to his fellow cast and crew members whenever the script required him to say something he found objectionable. The issue came to a head during the film's final act, when his character Mortimer Duke needed to shout an expletive-laden line at a group of Wall Street executives after realizing he and his brother had been financially ruined. The script called for Mortimer to yell, "Fuck him!" in a moment of rage and desperation, which was completely against everything Ameche stood for as a performer and as a person. Director John Landis knew this was going to be a challenge, so he worked out a compromise with the veteran actor that would respect his boundaries while still getting the scene they needed for the film. Ameche agreed to perform the line exactly one time and absolutely refused to do a second take under any circumstances. This meant that Landis and his crew had to be completely prepared, with cameras rolling and everything set up perfectly, because they would only get one chance to capture the moment. When the cameras started rolling, Ameche delivered the profane line with all the anger and frustration the scene required, nailing it in that single take. The director got what he needed. Ameche never had to repeat the offensive word, and the scene made it into the final cut of the movie exactly as it was filmed that day. Fact 4, $6 billion in trading was halted for Murphy and Aykroyd. When it came time to film the climactic trading floor showdown in Trading Places, director John Landis needed the real deal, so the production crew headed to the World Trade Center's commodity exchange called COMEX, located inside 4 World Trade Center. The plan was straightforward enough. Bring in Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy during a regular weekday, mix them in with actual commodity traders, and capture the authentic chaos of the trading floor while the Duke brothers watch their empire crumble. But there was one major problem the filmmakers didn't anticipate, and it had everything to do with just how famous Eddie Murphy was becoming. According to the studio's production notes, the shoot was initially scheduled for a normal weekday when real trading would be happening, which would have given the scene that genuine energy and urgency that Landis wanted. The production had invested a significant amount of money filming in New York City, and the mayor's office had agreed to accommodate their requests to use these high-security financial locations. Everything seemed set up perfectly until Murphy and Aykroyd actually stepped onto that trading floor. The moment the 2 stars appeared, the entire operation fell apart. The real traders working on the floor became so distracted by the presence of these Hollywood celebrities that they couldn't focus on their jobs anymore. People were gawking, trying to get a glimpse of the stars, and the normal flow of business came to a grinding halt. The disruption was so complete that an estimated $6 billion worth of trading had to be stopped entirely. $6 billion. The financial impact was so significant that the production had no choice but to abandon their weekday filming plan and completely reschedule the entire shoot for that weekend instead, when the exchange would be closed and they could bring in a mix of real traders and professional extras without disrupting actual business. In the final film, most of the people you see on screen are actual commodity traders who came in on their day off to be part of movie history. Fact 5, Eddie Murphy's entire jail scene was improvised. One of the most memorable moments in Trading Places happens early in the film when Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy, finds himself locked up in a Philadelphia jail cell. What makes this scene so special is that practically none of it was actually in the script. Murphy completely improvised his hilarious performance, including his now famous karate impersonation, without any direction from the filmmakers telling him what to do. In the scene, Murphy's character is sharing a cell with other inmates when he suddenly launches into an over-the-top martial arts routine, complete with exaggerated sound effects and wild physical movements. He kicks, chops, and yells his way through what appears to be a completely spontaneous demonstration of supposed fighting skills, all while his fellow cellmates watch in bewilderment. The entire sequence was Murphy just riffing and doing whatever came to mind in the moment, which speaks volumes about his natural comedic talent and his ability to create comedy gold on the spot. This wasn't unusual for Murphy at the time, as he was coming straight from Saturday Night Live, where improvisation and quick thinking were essential skills. The young comedian, who was only in his second feature film, brought that same energy and spontaneity to the Trading Places set. Director John Landis, who had already proven his willingness to let talented actors explore their characters freely, simply let the cameras roll and allowed Murphy to do his thing. The fact that such an iconic and frequently quoted scene came entirely from Murphy's imagination shows just how much raw talent he brought to the production. There were no scripted jokes, no planned movements, and no specific direction about how the character should behave in that moment. Murphy simply inhabited Billy Ray Valentine and let the character's personality shine through, creating comedy that felt authentic and fresh. This improvisational approach helped establish Murphy as one of Hollywood's most naturally gifted comedic performers, and the jail cell scene remains one of the film's most beloved moments more than 40 years later. Fact 6. The film, inspired in actual Wall Street law trading places, didn't just entertain millions of moviegoers, it actually changed American financial law. In 2010, 27 years after the film's release, Congress passed a regulation as part of the Wall Street Transparency and Accountability Act that directly referenced the movie's plot. The provision banned anyone from using misappropriated government information to trade commodities, which is exactly what the villainous Duke brothers attempted to do in the film. The rule became officially known as the Eddie Murphy Rule, making it one of the rare instances where a Hollywood comedy inspired actual federal legislation. In the movie, the Duke brothers bribe a corrupt official named Clarence Beeks to steal an advance copy of a confidential United States Department of Agriculture report on orange crop forecasts. Their plan is to use this insider information to corner the market on frozen concentrated orange juice futures before anyone else knows what the report says. The scheme would have made them a fortune if Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd's characters hadn't intercepted the report and used it against them. What made this plot point even stranger is that when Trading Places was released in 1983, this type of insider trading using government commodity reports wasn't actually illegal. The loophole existed for decades, and the film essentially exposed how vulnerable the system was to this exact kind of manipulation. When the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act was being drafted in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, legislators specifically cited Trading Places during testimony about reforming commodities trading markets. Section 746 of the Act closed the loophole, and financial industry insiders immediately dubbed it the Eddie Murphy Rule. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Eddie Murphy himself later admitted in interviews that he had no idea how commodities trading actually worked while filming the movie and was just reading his lines. He never understood the stock market scenes, but somehow helped inspire a real law that regulates Wall Street to this day. Fact 7. April Wheat doesn't exist. If you pay close attention during the dinner scene where Billy Ray Valentine is enjoying his newfound wealth and rubbing elbows with his former acquaintances, someone at the table asks him what he thinks about April Wheat. Billy Ray confidently gives his opinion on the market, sounding like he knows exactly what he's talking about. The problem is, April Wheat isn't a real commodity contract that you can actually trade on any legitimate commodities exchange. The filmmakers deliberately invented this fake commodity to avoid some serious legal complications. According to a real commodities broker who spotted this detail, you need to have the proper license and authorization just to publicly comment on or give advice about actual commodity markets. If the characters in the film had been discussing real wheat contracts or other legitimate commodities by name and giving specific trading advice, the production could have faced regulatory issues or even legal action from financial authorities. This wasn't just a random oversight or creative liberty. It was a calculated decision by the screenwriters Timothy Harris and Herschel Weingrod and director John Landis to protect themselves. By creating a fictional commodity like April Wheat, they could have the characters discuss trading strategies and make predictions without technically violating any securities or commodities regulations. The scene still works perfectly for the story because most audience members wouldn't know the difference between real and fake commodity contracts anyway. What makes this particularly clever is that the fake commodity blends right in with the dialogue. The conversation flows naturally, and Billy Ray's response sounds completely legitimate, even though he's commenting on something that doesn't exist in the real financial world. The filmmakers knew that very few people watching the movie would catch this detail, but they weren't willing to take the risk of using real commodity names and potentially running afoul of financial regulations. It's one of those behind-the-scenes decisions that shows just how carefully the production had to navigate the world of high finance, even in a comedy film. Fact 8. It's Italy's biggest Christmas tradition. While Americans might gather around the television for A Christmas Story or It's a Wonderful Life during the holidays, millions of Italians have a very different seasonal ritual that might surprise you. Every year on Christmas Eve, families across Italy tune in to watch Trading Places, and this tradition has been going strong for over 3 decades now. The film, known in Italy as Una poltrona per due, which translates to an armchair for two, has become as essential to Italian Christmas celebrations as panettone and midnight mass. The tradition started on December 26, 1989, when the Italian television network Italia 1 first broadcast the film. While Trading Places had been released in Italian theaters back in January of 1984 and only ranked as the 13th most viewed film that year in Italy, something magical happened when it hit the small screen during the holiday season. Since 1997, the film has aired almost every single Christmas Eve with only a handful of exceptions, and viewership numbers have been climbing steadily year after year. In 2022, more than 1.9 million Italian viewers tuned in to watch Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd's antics. The following year, that number jumped to 2 million, and by 2024, it had reached an impressive 2.4 million viewers. To put this in perspective, the film's popularity has grown so much that in 2019, its viewership numbers came close to rivaling the audience for the traditional Christmas Mass broadcast, which shows just how deeply embedded Trading Places has become in Italian holiday culture. There are practical reasons behind this annual tradition beyond just the film's entertainment value. Broadcasting the same classic movie each year costs Italian networks significantly less than purchasing rights to new titles, making it an economically smart choice. But the real magic is that Italian audiences genuinely love this film, passing down the tradition from one generation to the next, making Trading Places an unexpected but beloved part of how Italy celebrates Christmas. Fact 9. Jamie Lee Curtis's sister plays Muffy. If you watch Trading Places closely, you might notice something interesting about the character named Muffy, one of the wealthy debutantes who appears in the country club scene where Louis Winthorpe is desperately trying to reconnect with his former social circle. The actress playing this minor but memorable role is Kelly Curtis, who happens to be Jamie Lee Curtis's real-life sister, making this a genuine family affair on set. Kelly Curtis appears in the scene where several young women from Philadelphia's upper crust are being serenaded by wealthy young men at the exclusive country club. This is the same sequence where Dan Aykroyd's character Winthorpe, now completely fallen from grace and dressed in a filthy Santa Claus costume, tries to beg his former friends for help and money to pay for his legal defense. The moment is both tragic and darkly comedic, as we watch someone who once belonged to this world being completely rejected by the people he thought were his friends. While Kelly Curtis only has a small part in the film, her presence adds an extra layer of connection to the production, especially since her sister Jamie Lee was fighting so hard to break away from being typecast as a horror movie scream queen. At the time Trading Places was filmed in 1982 and 1983, Kelly Curtis was also working as an actress, though she never achieved the same level of fame as her sister. The casting of Kelly in this brief role shows the kind of attention to detail and personal touches that director John Landis brought to the production. It's worth noting that this wasn't the only family connection in the cast. The film also featured Nicholas Guest, who would later become Jamie Lee Curtis's brother-in-law, playing the small role of Harry. These kinds of connections were fairly common in Hollywood productions of the era, where directors often cast friends and family members in smaller roles to fill out the world of their films and create a sense of authenticity. Fact 10. The gorilla was a famous commercial actor. If you watched television in the 1970s and early 1980s, you probably saw the gorilla from Trading Places before you ever saw the movie. The actor inside that gorilla suit was Don McLeod, a professional mime who had already become something of a celebrity for playing a gorilla in a wildly popular series of commercials for American Tourister luggage. Those commercials showed a gorilla absolutely demolishing suitcases in hilarious ways to prove how tough the luggage was, and they became iconic enough that McLeod developed a reputation as one of the best gorilla performers in the business. When director John Landis needed someone to play the real gorilla on the train in Trading Places, McLeod was the obvious choice because of his experience and the physicality he brought to the role. The scene required an actor who could convincingly portray a gorilla's movements and behavior while also playing off the other actors in a confined train compartment. And McLeod's commercial work had already proven he could handle exactly that kind of performance. His years of experience meant he understood how to move like a gorilla in a way that looked natural and believable on camera, even though he was wearing a costume. What makes this casting choice even more interesting is that the gorilla became central to one of the film's most controversial and talked about sequences. The character Clarence Beeks gets knocked unconscious by the gorilla, then gets dressed in a gorilla suit and locked in the cage with the real gorilla, leading to the infamous implied interspecies encounter at the end of the film. McLeod had to perform in a way that made this bizarre plot point work comedically while still maintaining the illusion that he was an actual gorilla reacting to what he thought was a female of his species. His professional mime training and his experience from those luggage commercials gave him the skills to pull off this strange and difficult scene that has remained one of the most memorable and debated moments in the entire movie. Fact 11. Aykroyd's mugshot honors. John Belushi. When Dan Aykroyd's character Louis Winthorpe III gets arrested and processed at the police station in Trading Places, sharp-eyed viewers might notice something familiar about his mugshot number. The number displayed beneath his face reads 747-45058, and it's not just a random string of digits chosen by the props department. This exact same prison number appeared in the 1980 film The Blues Brothers, where it belonged to Jake Blues, the character played by John Belushi. Director John Landis included this detail as a deliberate and touching tribute to Belushi, who had tragically died from a drug overdose on March 5, 1982, just months before Trading Places began filming in December of that same year. The loss of Belushi hit Aykroyd particularly hard since the two had been close friends and comedy partners, first meeting as cast members on Saturday Night Live and then starring together in The Blues Brothers. Aykroyd and Landis had both worked closely with Belushi on that film, which became a massive hit and solidified the duo's status as one of comedy's greatest partnerships. When Trading Places went into production, Belushi's death was still fresh in everyone's minds, and the film industry was mourning the loss of one of its brightest comedic talents at just 33 years old. By using the same prison number, Landis and Aykroyd found a subtle way to honor their friend's memory without drawing attention away from the story. It's the kind of inside joke that Belushi himself would have appreciated, a small detail that only the most dedicated fans would notice, but that carried genuine emotional weight for those involved in making the film. The number appears in other Landis films as well, becoming something of a signature tribute that continued to keep Belushi's memory alive in Hollywood long after his passing. Even Jim Belushi, John's younger brother, later acknowledged the tribute on social media, saying he never knew about it until fans pointed it out decades later. Fact 12. The money clip fumble was a happy accident. Sometimes the best moments in movies happen completely by accident, and Trading Places has a perfect example of this during a scene with Don Ameche. In the film, Ameche plays Mortimer Duke, one of the two wealthy brothers who orchestrate the cruel social experiment at the heart of the story. During a scene where the Duke brothers are handling their business affairs, Mortimer is supposed to catch a money clip that's being tossed to him. But when the cameras rolled, something unexpected happened that would end up making the scene even funnier than anyone had planned. Don Ameche simply couldn't catch the money clip. He fumbled it, dropped it, and struggled to grab it as it bounced around, creating an awkward and hilarious moment that perfectly captured the bumbling nature of his character. Now, in most film productions, this would have resulted in someone yelling cut and the scene being reset for another take. The prop department would have made sure the money clip landed perfectly in Amesh's hand on the next attempt, and that would have been that. But something remarkable happened instead. Rather than breaking character or stopping the scene, Amesh and the other actors just kept going. They stayed completely in the moment, working the fumble into their performances as if it had always been part of the script. Director John Landis and the film crew immediately recognized that this unscripted mistake was actually comedy gold. The genuine awkwardness of the moment, combined with the actors' commitment to staying in character, created something far more authentic and funny than what had been written on the page. The decision was made to keep the fumbled money clip in the final cut of the movie, and it remains one of those small details that fans love when they catch it. It's a testament to the professionalism and quick thinking of the entire cast that they could turn what might have been considered a blooper into one of the film's most charming moments. Fact 13. Inga from Sweden wears German clothes. In one of the film's most memorable scenes, Jamie Lee Curtis disguises herself as a Swedish exchange student named Inga to fool the villain Clarence Beeks on a train, but observant viewers immediately notice something odd about her costume. While Curtis speaks with what's supposed to be a Swedish accent and introduces herself as being from Sweden, she's actually wearing lederhosen, which is traditional clothing from Germany and Austria, not Sweden at all. This wardrobe choice wasn't some kind of intentional joke or mistake by the costume department, but rather the result of a last-minute change during production that nobody bothered to fix. The original plan was for Curtis's character Ophelia to pretend to be an Austrian exchange student, and the costume department had already prepared the lederhosen outfit to match that background. Curtis worked hard to prepare an Austrian accent for the scene, but when it came time to film, she simply couldn't nail it convincingly. Director John Landis and the crew realized the accent wasn't working, so they made a quick decision to switch the character's nationality from Austrian to Swedish instead, figuring that would be easier for Curtis to pull off. The problem was that they had already dressed her in the full lederhosen costume, complete with the traditional German-style outfit that had nothing to do with Sweden. Rather than delay filming to find a new costume or reshoot the entire sequence, they just went ahead and kept the lederhosen while Curtis performed her lines as a Swedish character. The mismatch between the costume and the nationality became one of those happy accidents that actually works in the film's favor, adding an extra layer of absurdity to the already ridiculous disguise scene. Most audiences at the time didn't catch the geographical wardrobe error, and those who did probably just assumed it was part of the joke. Curtis herself has spoken about the accent difficulties in interviews over the years, acknowledging that sometimes what doesn't work perfectly behind the scenes ends up creating unexpected moments on screen. Fact 14. Eddie Murphy had no clue about commodities trading. The climactic finale of Trading Places is one of the most memorable sequences in 1980s comedy, with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd frantically buying and selling frozen concentrated orange juice futures on the trading floor while bankrupting the villainous Duke brothers. The scene is filled with rapid-fire financial jargon, complex trading strategies, and Murphy's character, Billy Ray Valentine, confidently making calls that seem to prove he's a natural-born trader. But here's the twist that makes this whole sequence even more hilarious in retrospect. Eddie Murphy had absolutely no idea what any of it meant while he was filming it. Years after the movie's release, Murphy openly admitted in interviews that he was completely lost during the entire commodities trading storyline. He confessed that he didn't understand how the stock market worked, had no clue about futures contracts, and couldn't follow the mechanics of the scheme his character was supposedly executing with expert precision. Murphy's approach was refreshingly simple and honest. He just memorized his lines and said them with conviction, trusting that the audience wouldn't know the difference. And it worked perfectly, because his performance is so energetic and confident that viewers assume Billy Ray Valentine knows exactly what he's doing. What makes this admission even funnier is that the film's trading sequence has actually been praised by financial experts for being reasonably accurate in depicting how commodities markets function. Multiple publications have published detailed breakdowns explaining the short-selling strategy that Valentine and Winthorpe use to destroy the Dukes. And the movie even inspired a real financial regulation in 2010 called the Eddie Murphy Rule. So while Murphy was standing on that trading floor yelling about selling 30 April contracts at 142, he was apparently just as confused as most audience members about what those words actually meant. The irony is that his clueless but confident delivery made the scene iconic, proving that sometimes great acting is less about understanding every detail and more about selling the moment with pure charisma and energy. Fact 15. G. Gordon Liddy refused the role. Over guerrilla sex. When the casting team for Trading Places was looking for someone to play the villainous Clarence Beeks, they approached one of the most notorious figures in American political history. G. Gordon Liddy, the central figure in the Watergate scandal of the early 1970s, was offered the role of the corrupt security expert who helps the Duke brothers with their insider trading scheme. Liddy was actually interested in taking the part and seriously considered accepting it, which would have marked a surprising turn from politics to Hollywood acting. However, his interest came to an abrupt end when he read through the entire script and discovered exactly what happens to his character at the end of the film. In the movie's final act, the heroes need to stop Beeks from delivering a stolen government report about orange crops to the Duke brothers. During a costume party on a train, they knock Beeks unconscious and come up with an elaborate plan to get rid of him. They dress him in a gorilla costume and lock him in a cage with a real gorilla that's being transported on the same train. The implication in the film is that the gorilla, believing Beeks is a female gorilla, becomes romantically interested in him. The movie shows the gorilla appearing quite affectionate toward the costume Beeks, and the scene ends with both of them being shipped off to Africa together in a crate. When Liddy learned that his character would essentially become the unwilling romantic partner of a gorilla, he immediately declined the role. The part ultimately went to actor Paul Gleason, who's best known for playing the strict principal in The Breakfast Club. In an interesting touch, Gleason's character is shown reading a copy of Liddy's autobiography titled Will while riding on the train, serving as a small tribute to the man who turned down the role. The gorilla itself was played by mime artist Don McLeod, who had already become well known for portraying gorillas in American Tourister luggage commercials.